The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, all. We'll get started about 3 minutes after the hour. Just as a reminder, this is a DGS only class, so if you've joined inadvertently, please close the session. This is for, again, for DGS only users. Thanks. Again, good morning. We will be beginning in a few minutes. If you're not seeing my screen, please let me know if you're having audio problems. I did type in the window. Hopefully anybody having audio problems will see that and respond. If you are, we can address that prior to getting started. I have unmuted all of you. From my side, you'll be able to unmute yourself if you want to ask questions as we go along, so feel free to do that. I ask you to stay muted during the session just to cut down on background noise. Again, we'll get started in just a few minutes. Thanks. All right, good morning, all. My name is Brian Rothery with Project Team. This is the Project Budget and Finance training for Project Team. I appreciate everyone attending. As a reminder, this is a class intended for DGS, BDI, and FTG users. So if that is not one of the groups that you're in, please sign off of the meeting. Again, this is intended just for those users. Our agenda today is we're going to be going through the creation of a project, assigning project funding to that project, initiating routing slips for MOUs and reprogramming, as well as budget amendments to transfer funds within accounts on a project or to transfer funds out of a project. I have unmuted all of you. You should have be able to unmute yourself if you want to speak. Please feel free to do so as we go along. We've got a relatively small group, so please ask questions as we go. We'll also have time at the end for questions. You should be seeing the Project Team DGS training screen right now. All of you have been there, obviously, to register for this class. Just as a reminder, on the quick reference guides page, down at the bottom, there's a budget and finance section. So we'll be covering most of these items. Again, project funding, project creation, account code setup, MOUs and reprogramming, and budget amendments.
Ryan, this is John. Payment application review and approval should be part of this one as well. That's the financial transaction group piece. So the top parts are for BDI. That's in the split. The BDI group will be responsible for those, and then the payment application piece is financial transactions group.
Okay. So I'm going to switch over to Project Team, and right now I'm looking at the DGS portfolio. The prerequisite to setting up your project is obviously that project has been funded and has an allotment associated with it. If I go into project budgets, for example, we'll look at this sports complex. And what we're really going to be working with here is the allotment breakdown at the bottom of that that project budget form. So we're going to use this information to bring in our account codes to the project, as well as bring in our budget items to the project. So we're going to start there, and obviously need to create the project so that we can pull this stuff in. So from the project pull down, I'm going to select View All Projects. Now I am under the assumption everyone has attended the project team introduction training. That'll be important just to understand the navigation and terminology we're going to be using. So if you're a little lost there, because you haven't attended that, I do recommend going and attending that class. So what we want to do here is create a new project. So up here in the top right corner, we'll see a green button that says New Project. We always want to create this project from a template. You only have one option here, this test project template. And then I'm going to click Create New and fill out some general information about the project. So we want to at least put a project name in there. That's the required field. You also want to populate your project number and any other information you may have available at this time. Once that's populated, you just click Save, and that'll start creating the project. That'll take 5 to 10 minutes because it's actually cloning some information from that project template into your new project so that we don't have to set it up each time. So I've already pre-created a project for this training so that we don't sit here and wait for that 5 to 10 minutes. So again, populate the required fields and fields you have available to you here, save the project. Once that project is created and available for you to use, you'll actually receive an email that says the project's ready. I've went ahead and created a budget and finance training project that we'll work with. So the first thing we'll look at is account codes. So we need to get the account codes specific for this project set up. So if I scroll down under project administration, I'll see an account code section. And this code structure has already been created as part of the template. Nothing that you need to do here. But the account codes themselves, you can see I have a test account code in here right now, but I want to set up the actual project account codes from that portfolio document that I was just looking at. So there's going to be a couple going back and forth from the portfolio to the project to pull that information in. So I'm going to go back to the portfolio. And again, all this is on a QRG of project funding step by step. So you can follow along on that. So once I'm back in the DGS portfolio, if I go to reports, under my company access custom reports, there's going to be an account code import. So I want to pull that report or run that report based on the project. So I'll have a list of all the projects available. So I'm going to grab this sports complex again. And what that does, it gives me all the account code segments that I need, as well as the description in order to create those at the project level. So I can run this in Excel to have it available, or I could just simply highlight all those cells that I want. I'm going to hit a Control-C to copy from here. And then if I go back to my budget project and to the account codes, I've got this import option. So just with all of our forms and features in Project Team, you have the ability to import in data with this three-step wizard. So I'm going to start by downloading the template. So this downloads a CSV file that I can open in Excel. And I've got all the segments and the description, all the information I just copied. So if I grab this cell A2 and then paste that information back in there, and then on my paste options, I'm going to just change that to the destination formatting so it just looks cleaner for me. So now I've got all my segments for all my account codes, as well as my descriptions. I'm going to save that. It's going to ask me if I want to keep it in the CSV format. It's important that I do that, so I'm going to click yes here. And it downloaded to my downloads folder. I'm just going to leave it there. There's no reason I need to save it to my desktop or save it for future use. This is kind of one and done thing. You don't need to save this file. So I'm just going to collapse this. And then if I go down to the third step where I upload, I'll go to my downloads folder, and here I'll have that file that I just saved. I'll select it, upload. It's going to give me a confirmation that those 4 account codes uploaded successfully and that there were no errors. If there was an error, it would tell me specifically what row of my spreadsheet that was. So it would say you have an error on row 4 because a data element isn't enough characters, or something like that. So with this import complete, if I click view account codes, I'll go and I'll see those 4 new account codes that are available for the project. So these account codes can now be used to set as attributes to your budget when you pull it in. It can also be set as attributes to contracts, change orders, payment applications. That way we can report on dollars across all of those segments of the project, even back to the portfolio level. So I'm going to pause for just a moment. If anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute and ask, or type in the chat window and I'll take a look at that.
This is IJ. John, quick question. Is this something that the PMs will have to do, or is this something BDI will do?
This is all BDI. I saw you on the list of registrants, and I knew you're interested in this stuff. But basically, you're here to just see what they do. You guys won't have anything to do with this.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, the next step is to actually get funding onto the project. So I've set up the account codes, but I don't have any dollars yet to spend for the project. If I go to the project homepage here, we're going to now look at budget items. So if I click there, I can see there's nothing available in the log right now. So I want to change that. So again, I need to go back to the portfolio, go to reports. I'm going to go under my company access and custom reports again, and I can run this budget item. Now, again, if you want to run both of these at the same time while you're here, save them, export them as Excel, and then you're not going back and forth so much, whatever's most convenient for you. I'm going to run the budget item. Again, I'm going to choose this same sports complex. Now I'm seeing the same descriptions. I'm seeing the account code built with all the segments combined, and then I'm also seeing the amounts associated with each of these. And all this comes from that allotment breakdown on my project budget. So same thing we did before. I'm just going to highlight all the cells that I want, hit a Control-C to copy, and then I'm going to flip back over to the budget project. Going to budget items. In the top right corner, where you see the 3 dots, I have the option to do a batch import. So I'm going to choose that option, and I get the same 3-step wizard we saw on account codes. I'll click download, open that CSV file, and I'll spread these apart a little bit so we can see it. Only 3 columns of data we're pulling in here, and I'll again change that back to destination formatting. So we have our, again, descriptions, account codes, and amounts. I'm going to save that. Again, it's important that I save it as a CSV file, collapse that, and then go down to step 3 to upload. From my downloads folder, I'll see this new budget items. And import successfully. No errors were detected. If I go to my log, I'll now see that I have a budget loaded into the project to start working with. Any questions about any of that? Again, I'll pause for a couple minutes to let people unmute or type in the chat window. Okay, I'm going to go back to the project homepage. The next thing we'll look at is MOU and reprogramming routing slips. So if I choose that option, and just as a reminder, if you don't have this on your favorite form types, if I click on forms, just type in MOU, I'll see that in my view all form types as well. So I'll go to that form log. We can see right now I don't have any routing slips. To create a new one, I'll click Create New. And we'll go through some of these fields. So I can select whether it's an MOU or reprogramming, the DGS role. So if this is a DGS providing services, I'm going to want to select SE. Type in the appropriate fiscal year. If I just hit Get Next, it'll give me the next number in sequence. And then I'll give this the appropriate title. In this case, I'm just going to call it Brian's MOU. And then I've got a few dates associated with it, the date it was created, due date, deadline date. Anytime I'm populating a date, just clicking in the field will give me a calendar, and I can select the appropriate date. I have the ability to expedite this with a checkbox. I can select my name. If I start typing in a name column, it'll filter that list down to whatever's appropriate. So I'll select John. Phone number fields do require a phone number format, so either 7-digit or 10-digit, and then a summary field for that. I'm going to go ahead and save this document. With that saved, I now have all the features available that you learned on the project team introduction of all the features for a particular form. So again, if I go down the left, I can pick who I want to share it with. We have auto share rules established where certain groups, as you can see here, have already been shared this particular form just based on its creation. If I wanted to share it with somebody outside of those groups, I can click the share window or button and choose those users or groups. I have the ability to initiate the workflow now. So if I click Start New and choose this MOU and reprogramming approval, initiate that. And I can see here the steps involved in initially created by John. It now goes for PM review. And then it'll progress through, I think, a total of 4 steps here. I have the ability to drag and drop attachments as appropriate. And then if I scroll back up and just look at the options on the right side, I can assign action items for this particular MOU, enter comments for just unofficial correspondence back and forth about this particular item, or link this to other documents. Sorry, I can see Renee asked a question. Let me check that. That's actually directed to John. He can't see that, so I'll read it for you. This says this far covers all the actions required by BDI and CCSD. Is that correct?
Yes, this is set up. Actually, the PMs are learning this as well because they're responsible, or their EPMs are responsible on their projects to initiate this. So the workflow, I'm going to take a look at that workflow because that was an odd one when it popped up. But the workflow is it would go from the originator to the EPM, I believe, or to BDI. And then BDI would add the funding information that they need to add. And I think right now, yeah, EPM review, goes through Paul first and then goes to BDI. What's the last step? Is that
That's
the
it.
last one?
Yeah.
Okay. And then BDI will generate, there's a merge template in here that generates the actual routing slip with all of the information like we had in Project Team or in Prologue. And BDI would then route it wherever it needs to go for approval after that. So this takes it through capital construction to BDI for funding.
Thanks, John.
You're very welcome. Brian, do you mind showing that merge template?
Yeah, of course.
I don't know if you put that one in here in the test project.
Should be. So in choosing the routing slip, just as a reminder, if you did have any attachments associated with this routing slip, there would be an intermediate step here that will allow you to select those attachments to merge into this PDF as well, but this is just the routing slip.
That's actually a very good point, Brian. The actual MOU itself, the MOU that comes from the agency or from us or whatever, should be added to the record as an attachment before it's sent up. So the physical document would be included in here, not just generating the routing template.
Yeah, give me just a moment. I'll find a file to throw in there just so that I can show how to do that. Okay, so if I go back to the MOU form down to attachments, and I'll just, I think I have an example PO, just that it's a DGS PO that I'll throw in here. Now if I run that merge template, again, choose the routing slip and next, I'm going to see a list of all my attachments. If I check that, it's going to merge it into the routing slip as well in the PDF. So now this particular PDF is 3 pages. It starts with the routing slip. And then here the third page is just this, in this case, just a PO that we had as an example. So all that can be sent as one document. If you see my options out at the bottom, I can save and share this directly, where if I click save and share, it's going to give me a list of people I can share that with. I can save and email it, which will pop up a window that allows me to enter email addresses. If I save and download, it downloads the PDF locally on my laptop, as you can see, but if I were to refresh my screen and look at this form, it also saves that as a static PDF linked to this MOU, so I can see what it looked like at that point in time. And if I now workflow this, anybody I workflow through this will be able to see that and open that PDF as a single document versus a form in our user interface. Any questions about anything on a MOU or reprogramming? I see a hand raised. Please feel free to unmute and speak up or type in a question.
Hey, hello, this is Shawnice.
Hello.
So I have a question with regards to the MOU. I know that we have to have the sister agency sign off on this stuff. So at what point does that happen? After it's with the BDI team or?
Hey, Shawnice, this is John. It should be signed off before it goes into here and gets routed. I imagine, I know you guys always have problems where it's not signed and you have to deal with it.
Right.
Yeah, when BDI gets it for funding, if it's made it that far, obviously the PM should catch it, or the EPM or Paul. But anyway, I'm sure when BDI gets it, they'll kick it back, and then somebody can just go in and attach the signed copy as well,
Right.
and rerun the template. Or if it does make it all the way up to you guys and still has it, you can do the same thing. You can come in here and create an action item back to the PM or everybody or whatever you want to do and say, hey, this isn't a signed copy, I can't process it. And
Okay.
please add a signed copy kind of thing.
Okay, thanks, John.
No problem.
All right. Is it Tama? You have your hand raised? You have a question?
I did, but I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We'll move on to budget amendments now. So go back to my project homepage and have in my favorites budget amendments. I don't have any created right now, so I'm going to go ahead and create a new one. Relatively small form, as you can see. So this one I'm just going to go call it design to construction transfer. So this form can be used for many different things. So to move money within funding sources. So in this case, from design to construction, maybe you had some extra funding, or at the end of the project, you realize you have funding you're not going to be using and you want to transfer that back to the portfolio. That can be recorded here as well. So I've given it a subject. I have some notes field that I can utilize if I'd like. If I go down to hit create new, and this is simply a ledger, so I would want to create debits and credits appropriately. So in this case, if I don't want to change the budget of the project, I want this particular amendment to be a net zero. So I would choose, in this case, the design account code, and I'm going to take 10,000 from it. And I can type in the reason, and then I'm going to click add new. I'm going to choose the construction, and I'll add 10,000 to that. So again, I end up with a net zero, but I've moved dollars between design and construction. Now, if I simply just had 10,000 extra in design that I wanted to move off of the project, I could just enter that first row and save that document. It would reduce my total budget on the project by 10,000, whereas this particular example leaves my budget the same. So if I save this document, again, once I save, I have all the same options we just reviewed with the MOU, with workflow attachments, comments, action items. But what I want to show is if I go back to the budget items and look at my log here, I'll be able to see that, thought I saved it. Again, going back to my budget items, I'll see that I can now see that amendment and how it impacts my overall budget. Any questions on amendments?
I want to add a couple of things before questions. These are obviously, we're recording transactions that have taken place in SOAR for the most part here. Budget changes, we don't just do them here, they don't go anywhere. So this is capturing contemporaneous information that happened. It's not generating a request for a reallocation or anything like that, or reprogramming. So with that said, it's also, Brian's doing this in the budget and finance project. Remember, we have the portfolio, the DGS portfolio project, where all the budget is tracked for the whole portfolio and every project and all of that. So the budget amendment would be recorded in the portfolio project for the portfolio budget. And then this would also be repeated on the individual project that it impacts, if it impacts a project. So there are times where we're moving money around in a funding pool that's not allocated to a project, that you would do up in the portfolio level budget. If the changes that you're making impact a specific project budget, you will need to record it in that project as well. And it's the exact same steps, just within the project budget. That makes sense to everyone?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this, like Brian showed you, this is set up to run as a ledger. The transactions are in and out when there are changes. Allocations are, initial CIP allocations especially are just in. But if you're moving it, you've got to do what Brian did. You got to take it out of where you're getting it from and put it back in where it's going every time. So you guys got to be very careful not to just put the $10,000 in construction. Make sure you're taking it out here. And these things, you can go back and correct things. Obviously you don't want to create more work for yourself. So it's not that you do this and then all of a sudden it's, oh my God, the budget's screwed up. Or no, it can be changed, but just be cognizant that it's a ledger and run it like that, please.
Okay, any questions? All right, John, I did not have payment applications on my agenda. We can certainly cover that, but do you have a project that you know of that has an example we can use?
I don't. CPO training has invoices in it. We can do that.
And I apologize not being prepared for this. Again, I didn't know it was covered, but we're just looking at a workflow action here.
Do you like me to take this one? Would that be easier?
That would be fantastic.
Okay. Can you give me control, or do you just want to scroll as I ask? Which one's easier?
Yeah, I don't. I'll stroll. Go ahead. Tell me where you want to go.
So for this part does not impact the BDI group. They have you guys are off the hook on this one. You have no involvement. So this is for the PMO, the FTG group. So pencil copy invoices are being tracked through project team. The approval, the submission, everything prior to the actual invoice being uploaded into the DC vendor portal. So the vendor is responsible to come in here and input their pencil copy, basically like we used to do in Prologue, for those that have been with us from that era. So they'll come in here, they have all their contract information, they have their change orders, all that stuff the PM's responsible for is in here. So they'll be able to enter their invoice. Their invoice will go through a workflowed process with approval for everything. The PMs have to record their approvals, all of that stuff in here. So once that's done, the PM will actually also upload their filled out CIP, their release a retainage letter that's signed if they need to, any of those documents they're supposed to give to the vendor for the vendor to upload the DC vendor portal will be in this record. So when all of that's done and the pencil copy is approved and it's ready for submission, the vendor will come in here. They will merge to template on this on their record, just like we saw on the other one we did, the merge template. This release of liens and claims will not be here. That's from an old something we were testing during the build that we need to remove. But the payment request application, go ahead and press. They'll generate the cover sheet and the SOV for the invoice right out of here from their approved pencil copy. So we have copied the form over. It's as you can see, basically the same form we already have. It's just done automatically. What this does is this eliminates those transposed numbers and things that don't match, and make sure everything is spit out to match the approved pencil copy invoice. They can't go back and change it between when the PM approves it and when they upload it. So once this is done, the vendor will take this, they'll build their invoice packet, they'll download all the documents from the record that they need for their submission, and they'll go put it in the vendor portal. So that's where you guys come in. When you see the invoices, now I believe the process is you guys see the invoices, they're in your workflow, you guys shell them in Prolog, and then you track them and process them. So with the new process, other than some stuff we'll talk about this afternoon, you guys won't have to shell anything anymore. It's going to be in here. So if you get an invoice in the DC vendor portal and you come in here and there's no payment application approved that matches that invoice in here, it gets rejected because the vendor didn't follow the process. So we can talk about other stuff. That's the process for now. I know there's probably going to be some questions on that one, but the process would be right now that you would reject it. So once it goes in there, you guys would come back into this record and do kind of the same thing you do in Prolog. You're going to track the invoice portion. So the PM is responsible for all of the pencil copy stuff, not you. And you're just going to come back and track the submitted invoice against it. So you're going to click edit on that record like Brian just did. And you're going to come in here to this invoice tracking section, click the create new like Brian did. You're going to put the, if there's additional PO numbers you need to put in there for change orders. If the past receipt number or number, the past receipt date, these are all the fields that you guys had in Prolog. Tracking it through payment. There's if you scroll down here, please, Brian, thank you. The payment date, the check number, all that stuff that you guys have in there now. You're just coming back and adding all that to the record. You hit cancel and scroll down.
Hey, John, I got a question. It's for you.
I
have a question.
Yep.
So in this system, financially, when we look at the financial aspect of the project in Prolog, we can see it being tracked as we go along. Is there a queue in here that'll show us what was previously billed and have that inclusive financial summary in it?
Yes, most definitely. Brian, can you scroll? Oh, well, let me cover this real quick and I'll circle right back to that.
Okay.
You see down here the invoice status. You guys have the way to change that. You can, it's got a drop down. See, there is rejected and hold for correction on the invoice. Remember, you guys are dealing with this invoice stuff. So if you have to reject it and pass for some reason, or there's a problem, or there's no funny, all those things, you have the ability to do that here and to enter the review notes right below it. This is rejected for here, this was processed, whatever it is that you guys need to put in there and status it back, you guys have that here. Now, this, you have the ability, if you do this, you can create an action item up at the top. Sorry, I know you'll have to cancel this. We'll go back to the actual record. So all that'll show up in these fields here. And you would come up to action items and say, hey, I had to reject this in past. You need to fix it. That can go to the vendor. That can go to the PM. That can go to both the vendor and the PM. You can include anybody you want, but this this is your ability to track and say, I have told you that this is rejected and passed, it's on hold, you need to fix it. Here's what's going on, here's when I need it by, any notes, anything like that, so that you can, you know, these action items show up for everybody and can be tracked. So this allows you to do all that if you need to. Okay. So what you were asking about, Shawnee's, Brian, if you can click on the financial summary, thank you. Is this what you're referring to, Shawnee's? This has all the previously done, this one.
Yep.
Just like the financial summary tab in Prologue.
Yep.
We also have, if you can scroll up, please, the item breakdown. This is your details that you would have had in Prologue that has the line items, so you can review everything. The change orders will show up in here as lines. It's very similar breakdown to Prologue. The difference here is we've added, you know, the account codes are over here on the right-hand side, so you can see which funding attributes apply to each, all the way to the right. Which funding attributes apply to each line. So if you have a question when you're in past creating the receipt, you'll be able to go, okay, I can figure out what line this is actually supposed to go to. Things like that. So that should be helpful for you guys.
So now, John, in the e-invoicing system, when the vendor inputs their invoice into the system and it has particular lines, they apply the funding amount against them lines, and there we have to follow that. Should that be the same in this system as it is in past with regards to the receiving and making the payment?
It should be, because the contract details, these line items are supposed to match the line items in the purchase order and subsequent change order purchase orders, obviously. So you should be able to apply them that way. We all know that some of these contracts were not entered in Prologue correctly and have migrated over the way they were in Prologue. So there will be some, you'll have to work some of that magic you guys work already with dealing with Prologue, but it's very similar in how it works for you guys. So the stuff you have to do in Prologue, you essentially have to do the same thing here.
So at some point,
changing.
So will we have to actually correct any of the lines in this system, or we don't have the ability to do that?
You should not be correcting any lines in this system. If there's a problem, you should definitely send an action item. DGS has really, or Capital Construction have really decided that it's time to put the PM's job back on the PM.
Okay.
You make them do what they're supposed to do. One of the things that we've been very cognizant of in setting up this system is the ability for there to be trackable records like those action items, where you don't have to go do the PM's job. You can create that action item and we can track it that, you know, the PM needs to do something, they haven't done it, it's holding it up. We will have reports that will, you guys aren't going to have to remember all of this. There will be reports that show things that are on hold and things that haven't processed, and you'll be able to run them at any time against any project, things like that. But we're really trying to take the onus off of you guys to correct other people's problems.
Great, thanks.
Yep. So again, most of your responsibility in here is just going to be scrolling down and tracking everything. So the workload should be lighter. Now, Brian, can you go to the cost periods, please? Because this has come up already. So for those of you that have the meeting with me at 2 o'clock this afternoon, we'll be going over this a little more at 2 o'clock. Cost periods have to be set up. They work essentially the same way they worked in Prologue. We're going to use them the same way we did in Prologue. There's no change. They need to be set up on the project. They're settable by the PM. the PM needs to create them. So yeah, go ahead, Brian. They would create them much the same way, except for they have to do them one by one. So it's what it's called, start date, end date, and then they can do save and new. So there's one cost period that you saw in there when Brian was setting this up. When he gets this one in, I'll show you. We'll close this out. Okay, so you see that big cost period there at the top sorry, what happened? We had another cost period.
Yeah, I'll switch to one of the other projects. It'll show that better.
Okay, sorry, thank you. I thought that was in there. Yeah, so we have this cost period that you guys are seeing now in Project Team. We had to do this to migrate the projects over. So this cost period covers every possible cost period from every invoice we're migrating. So we could not create individual cost periods. We couldn't migrate the cost periods that were there, none of that. So that's why you're seeing this. So that's the only cost period that's on each project. Until the PMs go in and create their cost periods, you won't see any more. With the stuff that's going on right now, the interim stuff, we're probably, you guys don't have access to create these right now. We are probably going to change that. I'm just waiting for the 2 o'clock meeting so that you guys will be able to go in here and correct these things and move forward right now. So there's some other things that go into that, but I just wanted you guys to see cost periods are in here, very similar to Prologue and do apply. Any questions on that? Okay, I think I'm going to talk to Project Team, but I think on the second migration, I'm actually going to add cost periods to the project template for setup, where it'll put in, a monthly cost period for every single project or a number of them, so that when the phase 2 projects migrate, which is the bulk of our projects that are actually using the invoicing system, because so far it's mostly planning, these will be here. I just need to make sure that that's not going to cause a problem down the road if we do that. So you may not see this issue after phase 2, but we're working on that. Again, we'll talk more about that stuff at 2, but that's cost periods. Brian, I think the only other thing we didn't touch on, if we have the time, is the budgets at the portfolio level, the perf and budget and stuff like that, just how that stuff works. So we're jumping back over to the BDI group responsibilities again. So in Project Team, we have added what we didn't have in Prologue that kept coming back to bite us. So we now are tracking CIP budgets, awarded budgets, allocated budgets, budget amendments, all of that stuff at a portfolio-wide level. This is also what houses the data that gets transferred to those projects that you saw earlier in those reports and the imports. So project request, please, Brian. So the perf form, I think most of you are familiar with the perf. It's supposed to be done by the client agency and working with the PM. They request the project, basic information goes in, form submitted to DGS. It says, hey, can you guys do this? EPM works with the client agency, develops an actual project scope. They set a ROM budget. They pick mayoral initiatives, comp plan objectives, all that stuff. Here's the ROM budget breakdown. These lines right here, these budget items, the names for these in this allocated breakdown, these are key because you'll see this budget item field on contracts and change orders. It's like the account codes. So we have the account code line that shows the account code that applies, or the funding attributes that apply to each line. We also have a budget item field. The budget item field at the project level is populated with these names from this column. what that is not only are we allocating that line in the contract to its correct funding attributes, we're allocating the line in that contract to what budget line from the planning ROM budget it applies against. So if we have, in here we've got $2.6 million for design. In the project level, in the contract and the change orders, every time we're taking money out of that 2.6, we're going to say in that detail line item, this money applies to that row. This allows capital construction to actually track planned budgets versus actual spend. So that's the reason for that. That's something we've never had before. So there's definitely going to be a learning curve on that one for people, but once we get all that information in there, that's going to be very powerful and very good for DGS capital construction. So anyway, that's the PERF. So the PERF gets created by the client agency or EPM or PM or whoever. Project statement gets done from that. Once that part is done, that's what triggers the next one. So here, those documents would be supporting documentation for the CIP ask, all of that stuff. So they'd spit all of this stuff out, CIP would happen. So now we've submitted this project for this one's Parks and Recreation to the mayor and council for the CIP budget, okay? We've asked for money. So you'll see here, there's all these different phases. So we have agency ask. So that's, you put in what we requested in the CIP budget, okay? It's a form like everything else. You just come in here and you say, we've asked for this in this breakdown. When the mayor issues her book that says, here's what I propose for the budget, they come back in here to the projects. You'd add what the mayor proposed and the breakdown for her. So if she wanted to split it up in 7 different, or you don't have 7 that you would split, but 4 different phases, you'd put each line in as a phase. When the council comes back and say, okay, mayor, we see your budget, and here's our budget, here's our proposed budget, that goes in here. So we're tracking that. When the final budget is approved and issued, the allocation breakdown is right here. It gets added in this allotment breakdown. So this matches the awarded CIP. So every year, if we adjust the CIP or if it's an out year's funding, all of that can be recorded in here. You see appropriation years there. If that money is not coming until 2025, you'd see 2025 here. So we have the ability to track all of that. These are those budget line items that carry over to the project and get put in as budget items. Okay, so this is where all that info is coming from. So you guys in BDI group, this is the stuff that you guys will be taking care of at the portfolio level and maintaining and putting in originally. This is what you're working on now with the budgets you guys and Cassandra. I don't know if Cassandra's here, but if all of you have been working on adding these in at the portfolio level, so this is what it looks like when it's added. We're going to then take that and you guys will allocate it at the project level next. But that's what all of this is. Anybody have any questions on that? Okay, I don't think, speak up if this is not true, but I think Tana, Ebony, Cassandra, any of you that are here, you guys have been going in and adding these already. So I don't think we need to show you how to do that because you're already doing it. But speak up if you have any questions or stuff that hasn't made sense, and we can definitely walk through that real quick. I think we've got 5 minutes or so before the meeting's supposed to be up. So anything anybody wants to know?
This is Tama. I'm good, John.
Okay, thank you, Tama, and good morning.
I'm good.
Good morning.
John, this is Cassandra. I'm good.
Hey, Cassandra, good morning. Okay, just a couple of recaps. BDI group is doing all the stuff that we went over. That's PERF, project budget, portfolio level budget, all the budget stuff is on them. So you guys, it made sense to combine this training between the 2 groups because what you guys do does overlap with each other. And I think it made sense for you all to see one, what's in here and the new functionality and capability, and two, know what each of the other groups does because you guys work together a lot. So BDI is handling all of that. You guys in the financial transaction group are just doing the invoice processing, and I believe you are still involved in the MOUs. I'm not 100% sure, but again, you've seen how that works, and BDI gets it, and if you're the next step, then BDI will send it to you when it's ready for routing. We don't have all of the upper echelon that has to sign off on all that stuff in the routing slip in project team. That's why the workflow for that ends with BDI, because then they take it, and I think it goes out of the system from there. Now, everybody cool? Any other questions? Any concerns? All right, well, thank you very much for joining us, everyone. I appreciate it. Brian, thank you very much for all of that. That was great. I think it really shows everybody what's going on.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Talk to y'all soon.
Very informative.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.